Okay, so I'm going to show you how I reconstitute my pieces of silver clay that don't work out, various projects here, and I've got a pile of stuff in here that just never quite worked out quite right, and it's all dried, and I tend to kind of throw it all into a pot. This one happens to be PMC3. Throw it into a pot, and then when I get to a point where I'm needing some more mixed up, I'll go through this process. So my dried pieces are now going to go in my coffee bean grinder, which naturally I only use for grinding up PMC and silver clay, not for grinding coffee anymore. The lid goes on here, and it's going to make a lot of noise. And these things are quite cheap. You can pick them up from the hardware store, and they have a limited life because it's quite a task to grind all this silver. So here I go. I'm going to give it a shake. I'm giving it a shake to make sure that any lumps and bumps get ground up too, because there's a slight gap in the bottom between the blade and the base of the machine. So it takes seconds to get a really fine powder. So there you have the fine silver powder, and it might look like there's lumps in this, but there really aren't. It's actually very, very fine powder that just happens to be clumping together. So it's all ground really, really finely. But just to make sure that it's ground really finely, I'm going to sieve the powder. And I just happen to be using a fairly coarse piece of material that I have around. I found that enamelling sieves were too fine. Or the ones that I had here were too fine. You could probably use a tea strainer if you had a fairly fine one. This seems to work for me quite well, and it's really to catch any lumps that may have remained in the grinding, and also to remove any bits of hair or fluff and stuff that may have got rolled into my clay originally. So I'm going to start sieving now. And I'm working over a piece of laminated paper, and that's going to help catch any stray dust and clay, so I can put it back in my recycling pot. I'm just going to start to get the silver clay powder to go through this fairly coarse sieving material, so that any little lumps and bits of debris get left behind can either go back into the grinding pot. You can see there's a few little bits there that didn't quite make it, so they can now go back into my grinding pot. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this amount up, but if I was to grind this entire pot, I'd sieve it like this and then keep it in a powdered form. So I could keep this whole pot full and keep it like that for weeks and weeks and weeks, and just mix up into a clay as I need it. And I have been making stuff out of PMC for a very long time now, and I have never found that the binder degrades in any way. There are probably still pieces mixed in with this clay that have been recycled and reconstituted many times over, and I haven't had no problem with strength or degrading of the binder, and this is all I do. I don't mix in any fresh clay each time I do it or anything else. And when I'm mixing up a fresh batch of clay, I wait and only mix up the fresh batch of clay when I need some more, when I start to run out. And I mix up a fair old amount at a time, because I find it easier to get the quantities right. So I guess that's a couple of teaspoons probably in there. And I'm going to spray a small amount of water. And this, although it looks like it has lumps in there, it really isn't. It's super fine powder that's all been ground up. There really are no lumps in it here, although it kind of looks like there are. So this is my freshly sieved and ground pot, and I'm going to spray in some water, and really the key is not to spray in too much at this stage. So I'm giving it a squirt. I can always add more later if I need to. Give it a squirt and start to mix it, and you can use anything you like to mix it with. I'm just using one of my favourites here, but you could use a palette knife, for instance. Anything you like that. And I'm really mixing it for quite some time so that it gets a chance to pick up all the water that's in there, and you might find you have to add a bit more, which I think I'm going to have to do in a minute. But it's really better to do this quite slowly. If you get too much, it gets tricky. And it really is one of the things I love the most about silver clay, is that anything I want to try out, I can just try it. Because if it doesn't work out, I don't fire it, and I can just reconstitute it again. I mean, I try things in silver clay that I would not attempt in sterling, because I don't know if they're going to work out or not, and I can't do much with it. I've got a huge box of unfinished objects in sterling silver, whereas I know, can you see how that's starting to pick up and clump together? So I'm going to keep mashing. I'm kind of mashing it with this rounded ended part of my spatula here, and I'm working over a laminated piece of paper so that any spillages, any of this mess that's popping out the side, can all be put back in again to my recycling pot. So we're starting to get there. It's starting to get clumpy. One more time. But really, less is more when it comes to the water. Now it's really starting to clump together. The difficulty you get if you add too much water initially is that you'll get just slime all over the inside of the pot, the inside of the mixing bowl rather, and it gets very hard to pick it up or get it out. So can you see how this is bunching up now? So I've got a nice clump here, and it's still a little bit on the lumpy side, and I can see that there's some dried areas in there too. So now what I'm going to switch to doing is some cling film, and this is good thick stuff from America. Our cling film in England is not so forgiving, and I'm going to double it up. Okay, so I've got double thickness here, double thickness, and I'm going to get my clump of partly mixed clay and water in there, and I'm not worried about these bits and pieces that are left stuck to the bowl or stuck to the spatula, because when they dry out they'll flake off really easily and go back into the pot that will go through the coffee bean grinder. So now I'm closing up this and starting to roll it through inside the cling film with my roller, and this is really forcing the water back into all those little particles and rebinding with the binder itself. So I'm really rolling it thin. And if I open it up, you can see that it's not too wet because it's not sticking madly. There's a little bit stuck here, but if I touch it to it, it sticks to itself. So this is actually looking like a pretty good consistency. So it's not sticking to my fingers or anything. I think it's going to actually need a little bit more water than this, but not a lot. So whenever I want to add water at this stage, I will roll it really thin again, so that when I open it up and spray my water in there, I'm getting that water over a large surface area of the actual clay. If I've got a little lump and I spray the water, well, that water's only on the surface of the lump. It's not getting evenly distributed through the whole amount of clay. So let's open this up. And I'm going to spray from a height over the whole thing and close it up so I know that water's getting in there. Come on, stick to yourself. Okay, and because I've got water here on the cling film too, I know that when I put it over here, it's getting on the outside of the clay that didn't get sprayed. And again, I'm rolling it ever so thin. And usually when I get done with this, I will mix it up like this and then leave it alone overnight and really let that water penetrate into all of the clay and really soak back into the binder, so that when I come down the next day and want to do my work, I've got good to go clay to work with. So I'm now just picking up the bits that have now had a bit too much water on them. And you can see it's pretty well reconstituted without many lumps and bumps in it. And I would fold it up and leave it to sit overnight. If you find when you start to roll it out that it's still a bit crumbly and a bit cracky, you can just go through that process again. Roll it out nice and thin inside your cling film, spray it from a great height so you're getting water over the whole thing, wrap it up and roll it in your cling film again. And with experience, you'll just know how much water to add. I can't tell you that it's 10 squirts because it's going to depend on the amount of powder you put in the first place and how much water your squirter squirts. So there isn't really a recipe, but after you've practiced it a few times, it's not that big a deal. And it's one of the best things about PMC is that you can reconstitute all your accidents and all your mistakes. So there's never any waste. So that's it. That's how I do it.